Hello and welcome back to the Football Fellowship podcast. My name is Mev.
And my name is Toby.
And what a blockbuster weekend of Premier League action we've just had. Newcastle United beating Sheffield United 8-0 in what was the Magpies' biggest ever win in their history. Liverpool beating West Ham 3-1 in what was a tasty encounter at Anfield. Arsenal and Tottenham Hotspur went to war in the North London derby, but for which team was a draw the better result? Plus, we're going to talk about Man United finally getting a win, Aston Villa piling on the misery on Chelsea, and what do the newly promoted sides have to do to get a win? Toby, how are you?
What an intro. What an intro.
Oh, definitely recorded like 5 times. The bin on your laptop is just full of intros.
You smashed that. That was a great summary. Yeah.
Eventually. Yeah, there we got there.
I'm all good, thanks, mate. Yeah, it's been a good weekend of footy. Big North London derby. That always makes it a good weekend, and it was a good, entertaining game, even if... Yeah, well, I suppose we'll talk about whether it was 2 points dropped, I felt, or if it was one gained from the game. But yeah, good one. How about yourself?
Yeah, it was good, thank you. Really enjoyed it. Just had some time to watch as much of the football as I could. Always difficult to watch all of it, but got through most of it. And do you know what? There was a lot of football to talk about, so we should probably just get into it. But starting off with, I thought the North London derby was going to be the game we were going to cover first, because obviously being the biggest game, the biggest rivalry. But we've got to talk about Newcastle United and Sheffield United. Newcastle beating Sheffield United 8-0 in what was an absolutely embarrassing performance for Sheffield. But you got to say to Newcastle, they thoroughly deserved it, didn't they?
Yeah, I think it was them going 3-0 up within, I think it was 30, 35 minutes. I think that really just set up the rest of the game. It meant Sheffield United did have to probably start to come out a bit. It probably meant they already thought the game was over, and I think you could tell that the shape had just completely gone from Sheffield, and it was easy for Newcastle, to be honest. It was one of those games where they didn't even actually have that many chances, Newcastle. They just seemed to score almost every shot that they took. They had an XG of 4 by the end of the game, so they overperformed by 4 goals to make it 8 in the end. And it was 8 different scorers as well, which I feel like that must have been like one of the first times that's happened, to get 8-0 and it be 8 different scorers, not a single player getting a brace. But yeah, it was just absolutely ruthless from Newcastle, really.
It was. And if I think about when Liverpool beat Man United 7-0 last season, I think Salah scored twice, I think Darwin Núñez scored twice, Cody Gakpo scored twice. So I think it's absolute. I think even when Leicester beat Southampton 9-0, both times I think. No, United beat them once 9-0, and then Leicester beat them 9-0. I think they've had multiple scorers, but then they've had some scorers that got multiple goals. But yeah, it's unheard of. But it's an absolutely brilliant performance, because as a manager, what more could you have asked for 8-0, 8 different scorers, almost everyone to get on the score sheet.
Yeah, it's like in Sunday League when like you're battering a team and sort of you try and get the left back a goal, get him a goal, put the goalie up front.
Yeah, exactly. Or when you're playing FIFA and you're like, you got the goalkeeper and you're trying to get him dribble past the whole team and get them to score a goal. It's like, Newcastle were amazing, and it was, I think, a bit surprising because I thought Sheffield United were slowly getting better. We saw their games against the likes of Manchester City, in which they did really well in stifling tough opposition, and Newcastle obviously struggling against AC Milan away from home, although they could have won it right at the death, which would have been the miraculous result for them. But I thought Newcastle would have been a bit more tired. Sheffield United would have been fresh, and with a slight upturn in the performances, not necessarily the results, they might have done something, but in the end, they just wilted away, didn't they?
Yeah, they really did, and it was 2 set-piece goals in the first half for Newcastle, which is difficult because it's not obviously based on Sheffield United's in-play during the game that was particularly poor in that first half. It was just getting off to a bad start as that, and then Newcastle really taking advantage, and they had some really standout players in this game, Newcastle, especially Kieran Trippier, who we hadn't really probably heard of, I wouldn't say, for the first 5 games of the season.
We've heard of him.
Yeah, but he hadn't like hit the headlines particularly like he did last season. I think last season he was racking up assists. Everyone was talking about how good of a season he was having, and I think this was the first game this season where he's really stood out. Whether that's because other players in the Newcastle side have stood out more, or maybe he just hasn't got off to a really like an amazing running start. But yeah, 3 assists in this game. As well as Anthony Gordon, I think has had another really good game, and so far I think he's had a really good season. He's looked really dangerous, he's looked really confident, and I think we saw that in his goal. He was sort of like jogging with the ball, and then he just thought, oh screw it, I'm just going to go for this on my own, whip it in, and it was a really nice finish into the bottom corner, and then they just kept going and going and going.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we could try and go through all the goals, but we probably forget them because there were that many.
Yeah.
But I just think, fair play to Newcastle because they've had some really difficult fixtures at the beginning of the season. Obviously, Liverpool at home, which they should have won, in my opinion, regardless of how, just because of the way the game went. But Man City away, Aston Villa at home, I know they won that, but they've had some really tough fixtures. And now with European football, there was a lot of questions being asked of this Newcastle side. Are they lacking depth? I've questioned them because with the injury to Botman, thankfully he came back for them in midweek and now again this weekend. And was there a lack of depth in certain areas? Is Eddie Howe good enough to manage this Newcastle side? What's the long term future with the Saudi owners? They're going to be pumping in more money. What's the eventual goal? But this was an emphatic victory and a great way to silence the haters. Like you said, Trippier with a hat-trick assist, and people are saying he's got quiet. Is he the first right-back choice for England? And is Bruno Guimaraes suited for that defensive midfielder role? Is Tonali playing well or not? Who should he play? Isak up front or Wilson? They've had so many questions surrounding them, and I think that's just because of the expectations have increased because of how well they did last season, getting into that top four under everyone's noses. No one predicted that, and now they've got to have these expectations on them, and people are out to get them really, and they've absolutely smashed it, and fair play to them.
Yeah, they have done really, really well, and I think that's just going to help them hopefully press on for the rest of the next sort of 4 or 5 games. There's going to be such a big confidence boost, especially sort of players scoring who maybe wouldn't have had much of a chance. Almiron maybe hasn't had as many minutes this season as he did last season. He's able to get a goal. Longstaff, who's come in for the injured Joelinton, also grabbing a goal. I think he got the first goal actually. So really good for them. In terms of Sheffield United, it just felt like they gave up in the second half, and it was really slow. There was no press. There was so many times where Newcastle just had so much space, and it looked really easy for them. It was that sort of that in between sort of the middle and the final third was where Newcastle would almost just walk it through sometimes.
Yeah, so if you're Paul Higginbottom now, how do you talk to these players on Monday morning, and what do you say to them? Do you just write it off completely, or do you try and break it down and analyse each goal?
I was just about to say that I feel like it's always the classic cliche of those sort of games that you have to just forget about it and write it off. But I think maybe potentially with a side like Sheffield United who are going to be low in confidence, I don't think they're really going to be able to you can't really write off an 8-0 loss. I think he has to address it and be really honest and direct, and I think it's better to call out not call out the players, but because obviously it's part of the manager's fault. It's obviously the way they set up in the game, the coaches, the whole setup for the game is obviously wrong, and the players not performing as well. I think you really have to address it and just say, right, this cannot happen again. We cannot let it be that easy for teams to walk it through us. Otherwise, they're just going to go back down. He's got to make it. I think it's probably it's probably better to make it the opposite, not to write it off. Make it a real statement to the players. Right, this is it. This is going to be the last time this happens this season. Let's look at where it went wrong and let's just make sure that does not happen again.
Yeah, and I think the most disappointing thing, apart from the fact that they lost 8-0, was the fact that it was at home as well.
Yeah.
So those home fans had to sit there and endure it. I mean, most of them didn't because most of them left.
Yeah.
There was a couple of shots of just a singular person in an empty stand and there was no one around them, which was just really sad to see as well. But they've got to try and go to the next games and, with some sort of positivity, they've got to try and ignore this game and go, right, for the other 5, what do we do? Because we didn't lose 8-0, but we were in those games. But now we just need to be defensively resolute and also get some goals. Because I think I said it on last week's podcast that they need to prove not only to other people, but to themselves that they deserve to be in this league. Because sure, we had them to go down at the beginning of our predictions, but at least have fun while you're there. Be like, we're not good enough to be here. We're probably going to go down, but we're going to give it a right go.
Yeah.
And it just didn't seem like that. I mean, Newcastle were just the far better team. They have more money. They have a better squad. So you'd expect them to win anyway. But at home, at least have a go. But it's just depressing. Sorry, Sheffield United fans. Really sorry. But yeah, I don't know what that feels like to go through as a fan. But I don't know.
At least it can't really get much worse.
No, it physically cannot get worse. They will not lose 8-0 again this season.
Clip it.
They will not lose 8-0 again this season.
No, they shouldn't. And I don't think any of their performances have shown that they would lose by that much. I wouldn't say I've been impressed by Sheffield United or pleasantly surprised. I just think they have been okay so far. And I think
Were we not oppressed against City?
against City, I would say that was the one game I have watched where I thought they didn't. City did not dominate that game, I would say. I think, yeah, I think they have had a clear plan of the classic sort of. They have to sit back. They don't really. Their squad, as well as Luton's, is a lot worse than the teams around them, unfortunately. And they have had some really good moments where they've shown some really defensive strength, and I think they can be able to get back into that. So yeah, I'd be very surprised if a result anywhere near what happened against Newcastle happens again, especially at home.
Yeah, I agree. So let's move on then to the Battle of North London. Arsenal 2, Tottenham Hotspur 2. And you're going to take it away as the Arsenal fan here. What did you make of that? And before you get into the game, what did you make the lineups when they came out? Because obviously for Spurs, they started with Kulusevski, Son, and Brendan Johnson up front. And for Arsenal, there was no Trossard, there was no Martinelli, and Gabriel Jesus started on the left. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise was Brendan Johnson playing, to be honest. When I first saw the lineups, I wasn't sure if Johnson was going to be on the left or up front, because obviously we've seen him play across the whole front three for Nottingham Forest. Normally actually probably playing on the right wing for Forest. But with Kulusevski having that position locked down, it probably was going to be the left or up front. With Arsenal, Martinelli obviously came off midweek in the Champions League. Was it in the Champions League? Or was
against PSV.
Was it the Prem game before? I can't remember. But he was injured, so he was not expected to be playing.
No, he came off against Everton, and then
Trossard came on. That was it. Yeah.
So much football's happened since then.
And it was, I think Trossard was injured either in training. I think it was maybe the day or two before. But there wasn't any sort of news released on it, which was a shame to see that he wasn't going to be playing. Because I'm not going to say I'm not a fan of Nketiah. I think he's a good player, and I think he has some real qualities about him. But I think especially against Spurs, I would have really wanted to see Jesus up front and somebody else on the left wing. Obviously, the ideal would have been Trossard, but maybe besides that, could it have been Smith Rowe or Nelson potentially? I think.
Was that your feeling before the game even started?
It would have been, if I would have known Trossard wasn't being able to play, I probably still would have had Jesus up front. I think he brings so much more than Nketiah, and I think, especially in a game like against Spurs where we are going to need probably someone to drop off a little bit. Spurs aren't going to leave a load of space in behind where Nketiah probably thrives the most. And then besides that, it was a pretty normal team for Arsenal. I was quite confident going into the game, I'd probably say, especially with the way we played against PSV, the 4-0 win. It was probably the best we've played all season, definitely. Really confident, really free-flowing. And it was again Jesus that I think was one of our best players in that game. He was amazing. He was just, the way he links up our play, everything revolves around him. And I hate, my pet hate is when Arsenal fans saying we need a new number 9 to score us goals, because I think he's not a goal scorer. He's not going to be a goal scorer, and that's not his job. He is just such a good playmaker and someone who brings so much to the team. So seeing him on the left, and I still think he played well. I still think he did a good job on the left, but it would have been nice to see him up front going into the game probably.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's perfectly fine on the left as well, but we would have liked someone else apart from Nketiah who's maybe a bit better. No offense to Nketiah, because he's comparing Gabriel Jesus to him. Jesus who's won I think 4 Premier League titles, so there's no comparison there to be made. The front three, just wanted to pick on that, was it feels very much like a Mane, Firmino, Salah front three, just a bit younger, and hopefully for Arsenal's sake at the club for a lot longer than they have been. So I think in the fact that Jesus doesn't score goals, I think he'll score a lot, fair amount of goals. I think maybe 12 to 15 this season, maybe in all competitions. But he would be relying on Saka, Martinelli, Trossard to be the ones to score the goals. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about Spurs as well, because this was their first big test coming into the season. Obviously, you can talk about the Man United game. That didn't quite transpire and they didn't have the difficult moments that they did have in the Arsenal game, because obviously they went behind both times, didn't they? Yeah, they went behind both times and they had to come back into the game. And they ended up having more possession. I wouldn't say they dominated the game with the ball, but they had the ball more, but they didn't do as much with it as Arsenal did when they had it. But I think that's because they were playing at the Emirates. They had to show respect. But the game plan, just trying to keep a hold of the ball, try and quieten the crowd down, worked pretty well. They did lose possession. I think 6 times Arsenal made interceptions in Spurs' half in that first half, and you could see Arsenal were breaking on them pretty well. But fair play to them, because they came to the Emirates and they did a job on Arsenal, which not a lot of teams have been able to say so far this season.
Yeah, I think on probably the overall play, a draw was a fair result. I think Spurs did play well. They had some really good passages and they had a pretty clear game plan of keeping that ball, trying to suck into Arsenal's press and then play around them. And there were some moments where, especially in that second half, I was really worried that Spurs probably looked more likely to score at times. The way they sort of had their rotations going from the defence into that midfield of Basuma and Sarr, there was a lot of times little passes round the corner, whether they were from full-backs or passes sort of cutting inside from the centre-backs, and it opened up a lot of space, particularly when Rice went off, which I'll touch on a little bit later. So yeah, probably overall a draw would have been a fair result. I think the first half an hour or so we really dominated Arsenal.
Yeah.
I think Saka was having probably one of his most exciting games this season. I think he had Udogie on toast, to be honest. I don't think Udogie really knew what to do a lot of the time. He's brilliant going forward, and he hasn't really had a defensive test so far this season. And I think this was the first time he's come up against a winger who's going to say, right, I'm going to have you and I'm going to take you on. And he did 3 or 4 times in that first half. And then it was Saka who got the first goal, deflected goal, and into an own goal.
Yeah.
But the amount of space that was left from White's overlap and Udogie not knowing where to go, it just gave Saka so much space to take his time, have a shot, and then we did get lucky with the deflection for it to go in.
Yeah. I don't agree with Gary Neville blaming Romero's positioning on that goal.
No.
Because he was saying, another centre-back would have been a bit more composed, say, and then he would have been a bit more straight on and would have been able to clear it. And I just think, just because it's Romero who's got a reputation of being erratic, Gary Neville's gone for him. And I'm just like, no. I mean, he's put his leg out. I mean, sure, the ball's maybe a bit high to be going with your weaker left foot, but I still think it happens. And Romero's been excellent so far this season, so I don't get that when he did that on commentary.
I think if him sticking a leg out he's trying to block the shot, obviously, and I think if he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be surprised if Gary Neville would have said, he's got to put his body on the line, it's the North London derby, and he's standing there turning his back to it or something. He tried to block the shot and he just got unlucky and went in.
If it's Van Dijk, Ruben Diaz, John Stones, Saliba, whatever, he just says nothing about it. He's just like, I was unfortunate. It was just one thing that really irked me in that game. But yeah, go on.
And then Spurs came back pretty much. They came back almost instantly. Really good move from Maddison into Son. And it was a really nice finish. And it was they had a couple of those in the first half. They had a good sort of moves down the wide areas, cutting them in. Brennan Johnson had a chance saved by Raya, really nice save. So they had a couple of good chances as well in that first half. Arsenal, we had another with Jesus where, like you said, it was good press from Arsenal, nicked it off Maddison and unfortunately put it over. At that point, it could have been 2-0. So I think, it's the same sort of story throughout the whole game of the first half. Both having some really good opportunities, both creating some good possession and moving it forward when they needed to. And did it feel like 2 points lost or a point gained? If you would have asked me before the game, I would have said it felt like it. I can imagine it would feel like 2 points lost. But overall, it's probably a fair result.
I'll tell you what, the reason why it feels like 2 points dropped is when you're in the title race against a juggernaut like Manchester City, even a draw feels like a loss because you know they're going to win and they're going to capitalise on it.
Yeah.
That's why it feels like 2 points dropped. And the fact that it's your rivals and it's Spurs probably sticks that needle in a little bit more than it would than if it was anyone else. So I just think, you're playing them the game before the international break. And obviously we're going to talk about them later on. But you got a chance because I think you might be at home.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're at home, I think you've got a good chance of beating them. But I think your injuries do hurt you. I mean, Saka, obviously, star boy, you don't want him to be out. Who comes in? Is it Havertz? Is it Vieira on the right? Nelson?
I don't know, because now we've got Rice injured as well. Came off. And
Jorginho came on, didn't he?
Jorginho came on and did not have a good game. He had almost the opposite of a game that you'd expect from Jorginho. He was, I don't know, he gave the ball away for their second goal. I don't know what it was. His passing and movement was okay, but it was when he was just on the ball, it looked quite cumbersome, looked quite slow. Really wasn't dictating the play like we'd seen. And now with Rice and Partey out, he's probably going to be the one starting. Yeah, I
mean, you can't really account for your first choice and your second choice defensive midfielder being out.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you do?
And Vieira, I wouldn't say had a great game. He's played well in the last couple of games, and I've been really impressed by him. So it'd probably be a toss-up of who's going to be playing between Havertz and Vieira going forward, because I think Havertz looked decent again when he came on. I think he's slowly building his confidence and getting there and adjusting to the position of that left centre mid. So yeah, it's that big one, that big City game. Hopefully we can have a strong enough lineup to be able to do some damage. It just depends on these injuries. Martinelli, Trossard, Saka got a little knock. Rice, Partey.
Timber.
It's adding up.
Yeah, but I won't be too sympathetic to Arsenal, I'll be honest, because I would talk about teams later on, but like Manchester United, Chelsea, they've also had some horrific injuries, and we have not been kind to them at all. So I think, if you want to be in the title race, you've got to do it. I mean, Manchester City don't have Rodri and Kevin De Bruyne in their midfield. So, injuries are going to be a part of it. But also, this just goes to show that how much luck is going to be in the title race. You just need to have a lot of luck. And then sometimes it's with you, sometimes it's not. So on another day, you might just nick a 3-2 win. You play poorly, but you take it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Spurs and Ange Postecoglou, really impressed with them. And going to be interesting because next week they got Liverpool away from at home. Actually, they're at home, and if they can win that game or get a positive result, then I think Spurs could do something this season. I was the fact that they on the bench they still had Richarlison who come on, Valise who we talked about at the very beginning of the season. Our season predictions, who is going to be an unknown quantity, and we haven't seen much of him yet either. But they've got some options off the bench. It's just going to be how fortunate are Spurs going to be with injuries. Because obviously Maddison got taken off earlier as just a precaution. It was almost as if Ange hinted that he wasn't 100% fit. But, like the Brendan Johnson's coming in as well. So how do you see Spurs doing this season after 6 games?
I think their aim is probably pretty realistic at top 4, I would say. I think even before maybe we saw how they were playing, that would have been Postecoglou's aim and probably his goal from the board is to get them back into the top 4, no European competition, so they can focus on that league and try and work up as high as they can. I think it is still early to say anyone is in the title race. I think we could say the same for Liverpool, the way they've been playing. They're second to City at the moment. Attack's been playing really well. Are they in the title race? Second in the league? You can't say yet. I think it's too early to call what the title race is. I think Spurs have just got to keep taking each game as they are. Like they said on the commentary I was listening to before the game, they've had a week to prepare for the Arsenal game, and they're going to have that pretty much every week, which is such a big bonus for them. And they've got a really well-drilled system that's kicked off nice and early into the season. It is their depth is probably the only worry. I think almost if any one of their players gets injured or gets a ban, I think that could potentially leave a big hole for them. But the way all their players are playing, and if they can keep going as they are against Liverpool next week, it could go either way.
Yeah, it absolutely could. And let's move on to that game because it was Liverpool 3, West Ham 1, in what was a very tasty and physical affair at Anfield. Both teams were really going at it. Liverpool managed to win out overall, but West Ham definitely gave a good account of themselves, didn't they?
Yeah, definitely. They had. And I think in that first half, they were probably the better side, I would actually say, to be honest. I think they had 2 or 3 really good opportunities. Antonio had one header that he hit wide.
Yeah, God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, Souček had another one, which was a great save by Alisson. And I think that's just been their clear strategy all season. It's sit back, absorb the pressure, and then it's all been changing, whether it's been their right or their left that they've been pushing up. I think the start of the season we saw it was more on the left. They were really countering down and then trying to get it into the central areas. But in the last couple of games, this is Kufal's second assist in 2 games now, where he was the one that was able to break, exploit that space and get a really nice ball into Bowen, who got the equaliser. But yeah, I think first half West Ham, again, looked really good.
Yeah, they really did, yeah.
But Liverpool's quality probably shone through more in this game.
Yeah, I would say so. Because, like, to be fair, you just helped me remember that first half a bit more. I was like, oh yeah, that was a bit dicey at times. But it was, like I said, Liverpool's quality, because it still worries me, and I have a panic attack every time I see it. But Liverpool starting Alexis McAllister as a defensive midfielder, he is a fantastic player, and he had a really good game.
He did, yeah.
But it just doesn't fill you with confidence not having a recognised defensive midfielder. Endo's come into the team and he's not really picked it off straight away, and it might take him a bit more time to get used to Liverpool and how to play an English football. So Alexis McAllister's been doing a fantastic job. but we are gettable in defence, you know. I want to give a shout out to the defence first off, because I know we conceded the goal, but still, Joe Gomez, Joel Matip, Virgil van Dijk, and even Andy Robertson, they were resolute and they stopped Mikel Antonio. Because I was worried about Antonio, because there's so many times you see him against Chelsea early on in the season where he just bullies our defence. But Liverpool's, mainly the three on the right, Gomez, Matip, and Van Dijk, were all over him. And they were not letting him get any space at all. He was losing most of his battles.
He didn't have a sniff.
He did not get anywhere near, and that's, fair play to them, because I think Joe Gomez came out after the game and said we knew Antonio was going to be a risk and we made sure that all of us were on it. There were times where Antonio was taking on two Liverpool centre backs and he was just still getting the ball. And also shout out to Lucas Paqueta, who had a phenomenal game, and similar to Dominic Szoboszlai and the team, seeing those two midfielders who just make the game look easy.
Yeah.
It is such a joy to watch players like that. And I feel really bad for Paqueta, because if it wasn't for the supposed betting thing over his head, he probably would have got that move to Manchester City ahead of Matheus Nunes from Wolves. And do you know what? He would not have looked out of place. He is a quality player. He ran the show, and he was toying with Liverpool's players from time to time. But Liverpool eventually, came out on top, starting out with trying to get out from a West Ham corner, and Darwin Núñez surprisingly had a really good game, holding up the ball really well, and the ball makes it out to Luis Diaz, and Darwin Núñez, who ended up holding up the ball in Liverpool's third, then makes a run the entire length of the pitch to get into the box. Doesn't quite get the ball, ends up back healing it, and then Salah gets on the end of it. Naya Figueira just fouls Salah, and Salah converts a penalty, which he hasn't done too much of recently, but it was a fantastic pen. And then, like you said, going to the half time, and then you could really feel the energy in Anfield, because you could feel the crowd being like, right, we know we're in for a battle, we've got to keep going. And West Ham were almost like the perfect opposition to have after a Thursday night fixture in the Europa League, because there was no room for complacency. It was at home, and the quality just shone out. I think Darwin Núñez, Mo Salah, Luis Diaz, I think that is Liverpool's now new front three. I think that Darwin Núñez, it's gotten to a point where you can't bench him, because he's so good going forward that you have to accommodate. He might not necessarily be as good defensively and on the press, but he's even showed he can hold up the ball. He can press in the system and not just as a rogue man on his own when he feels like it. He's still irrational at times. When West Ham had the ball, he made a couple of fouls. But I think that's going to be him. He's going to be super keen. He's going to be trying to tackle and try and win. And I think the fans are really taken to him. And I think Luis Diaz is now officially the Sadio Mane replacement, because he's been playing so well on the left-hand side. He's got the pace, he's got the power, he's got the directness, and he's got the finishing ability as well. So I think for Liverpool, it looks really good at this moment in time. And, I haven't even shouted out so many players, like Curtis Jones had a phenomenal game as well. So I think a lot of positives. The next two fixtures are massive, because it's Tottenham Hotspur away. It's Leicester City at home in the Carabao Cup. It's Tottenham Hotspur away. It's the second Europa League game. Second Europa League game at home, and then it's Brighton away. So Tottenham away, run. Brighton away before the next international break in October. If Liverpool come away with 6 points in those two games, then maybe we can start talking about Liverpool maybe being in the title race. But we have to wait and see for those two games, because they are absolutely massive.
Yeah, they are really big. And it's, like you say, I think it seems that the starting 11 is almost taking shape of what is your strongest team. And then you still got Gakpo and Jota as two to come in, who may come in for games where it will suit someone to drop in a little bit more, like Gakpo playing at centre forward. But yeah, Darwin Núñez has looked really good this season. He's definitely improving in areas of his game that we haven't seen, or areas that he's lacked. Can imagine he's someone who's really, really keen to sort of learn and to build as a player in the system. He really wants to score. He really wants to just be the best player he can. And I think this season we could definitely see him grow into a lot more of a complete striker than we saw last season. Like you said about McAllister having a really good game, he is someone I thought really stood out as well. 96% pass completion. He had 103 touches. 2 key passes, an assist, 2 tackles and an interception. Pretty complete performance. But again, still question marks about that defensive side of Liverpool. But I think, again, with West Ham, that's something that they've really like adapted to try and avoid. I think a lot of teams covering with a defensive number 6. I feel like even if you did have that, I'm not sure if sort of this SS against West Ham, it would have made too much of a difference. I think the way that they sort of counter and break is they skip any sort of runs that are going that the midfield could block. They are so direct in the way that they play, and they get into the wide areas really quickly that I don't think there would be much time for the number 6 to be able to cover and prevent that. And then they also even have the backup if they can't get it wide, like you said, of Lucas Paqueta, who's just so good on the ball. It just sticks to him, and he can play it through like a defensive midfielder himself a lot of the time.
Yeah, and the thing I want to credit for West Ham for is that they're so unapologetically themselves. Like, they don't care about the fact that we're not pretty in the eye, we're not going to have more possession, it's not free-flowing attacking football against all the teams, because against the lower teams you do see that from time to time. Yeah. But they adapt to the game in front of them, and they go, this is what we need for this game, this is what we need for this game. And it's refreshing to see, because you see so many teams who are trying to play on the front foot and always plays attacking, free-flowing football, like a team we're going to talk about later, which I do want to talk about, but I'm not going to name them yet. And the fact that they're willing to go, no, we know we're not the better team. And I think, sometimes that kind of side of football is lost, because everyone's so worried about what's the perception going to be of the fans, of pundits, people like us who are going to talk about it. But they just go, no, we're not better than this team against us on paper. We have to try other means of trying to win the game. And sure, they didn't win it, but against like a Brighton, when they did win 3-1, they do, they can get a result. Yeah. And I think it's refreshing to see.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Sort of for Liverpool this season, what areas do you think... What areas do you think you need to improve on as a team to sort of... Because I know you've played well, but almost each week it seems like there's something a little bit going wrong. There's something not quite there. What do you think? Because obviously you can't be signing a defensive midfielder. What could Liverpool do that would make you confident that you're going to have a high finish in the league this season, over the next couple games especially?
I already do believe we're going to have a high finish this season. I think I've seen predictions. We ended up putting Liverpool third, which on the way the season started doesn't seem too bad. But we didn't put them in. We talked about not putting them in the title race, and I think that's how it's going to be. I think the reason we could be in the title race is because we have so many players who have had that experience. But the reason I don't think we will be is because at some point in a game, we're going to be 1-0 down. It's going to be 60 minutes, and we're not going to be able to find that goal, or we're not going to be able to make that pass. And I think that's just how football works. You can't expect to win every game 3-1, 2-1, 4-1, because eventually it's going to be that one is going to be enough for the other team, and they're going to get a result.
I think you had that in Salah's record-breaking season, or was it the one before that potentially? No, where it was almost every game. It would be. I feel like there was the classic, like punters of Liverpool to win, both teams to score. I think it was almost every game you won, you also conceded.
I remember that season. So that was Salah's first season where he broke the record, the Premier League record, and the one where we made it to the Champions League final against Real Madrid. But then after that season, Coutinho got sold in the January. He went to Barcelona. We signed Van Dijk in late December, and he officially joined in January. And then in the summer, we then signed Fabinho and Alisson. So I do know what you mean. I would just say again that we do have the experience of the side of a title-winning team, and for some reason, the defense has been so settled for so long now, but they still can't keep goals out. So because Trent Alexander-Arnold, Joe Gomez, Joe Matip, Ibrahim Konate, Virgil van Dijk, Andy Robertson, Koch Samagas, they've been in and around the club for years. They've won everything together, this defence. So the fact that they're struggling to keep clean sheets, I think it is the midfield in front of them. And I don't think it's like an individual blame. I just think from time to time, a player is out of position or a player isn't quite there. And I think if you had the Fabinho of the title-winning side and the Champions League winning side, maybe we would be talking about Manchester City and Liverpool neck and neck. I just think to myself, like, imagine if Liverpool did sign Moses Caicedo and the midfield three was Caicedo, McAllister, and Szoboszlai.
That's tasty.
That could have been, but they didn't want to join, and they're playing at Chelsea, who aren't doing so well. So so that's me. I think, I think a trophy this year. And just being in and around the conversation come March, and then we'll see what happens. Because if we're in and around, I can see the team going on a run. Yeah,
it's good to hear. It's getting more confident each week.
It is.
As Liverpool, which is good.
So at some point, it's got to come down.
Yeah, but it's good because you've been playing well. So enjoy it whilst it's going well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it. Okay, shall we move on then?
Yeah, on the other side of Merseyside, Everton 3, Brentford 1.
What a result!
Yeah, it was finally worked out for Everton. I feel like I've been sort of tooting their horn all season, waiting for them to do something so I can be like, yes, I said that.
Yeah.
And it actually finally happened. I don't think they even played better this week. I think they just played as well as they have been in other games and were able to put the ball in the net, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just putting the ball in the back of the net. And apart from Chelsea, they've been the biggest underperformer of XG this whole season so far. And finally, it came into fruition with 3 goals against Brentford. And I completely agree with everything you just said. They played really well. Brentford were appalling, and I think part of it was the fact that they were just bad on the day, but also Everton made them look quite bad. And Everton just wanted it much more, and this is the kind of performance you'd expect from a Sean Dyche team. It's taken a few weeks for them to get this performance, and they need to have a few more of these performances more regularly. But these are really positive signs, you know. I mean, the whole team played really well, and there's so many positives to take from it. Pickford had a great game. I think Branthwaite at centre-back as well, a young local lad doing really well. James Garner, I thought, was an absolute machine. He was non-stop running. Dwight McNeil, Abdoulaye Doucouré, and I think Beto up top as well. He's coming from Udinese, a lot of money. There's a lot of pressure on him. And it just goes to show that, you know, just getting the right player in the right position can really come in handy.
Yeah, I think especially away from home in these sorts of games where you're going to be playing against Brentford, who like to have that ball in the sort of final third, whether they pass it up or get there quickly, they sort of do seem to interchange. But I think having Beto, someone who is a lot more comfortable breaking past the last defender than Calvert-Lewin was, who's probably more of your traditional target man, I think that's really helped to stretch Everton out. And I think Beto making those sorts of runs, the defence dropping back, and it's creating a much bigger gap between the midfield and the defence against Everton's opponents that I've noticed in the last few games, which has really helped sort of your Doucouré and your Onana press into that space. Them stretching the play, the ball going into there, and then having Beto up front as an option and your wingers really wide has meant that Everton have been able to create a lot of chances this season. Like we've said, the highest, second highest XG underperformers. And they were just finally able to put it in the back of the net. And even Calvert-Lewin coming on himself and scoring, which was good to see. And I think having that pressure from Beto of where Calvert-Lewin's probably not the starter at the moment, hopefully that's something where they can sort of work to push each other and try and be the best sort of strikers that they can be to work their way back into that team.
But that's exactly what Everton have needed for so long now, is that you can't rely on Dominic Calvert-Lewin to be injury-free for an entire season, or even for half a season in the last couple of years. So what they needed to do was buy a striker who's going to be fit week in, week out, who could do the job that Calvert-Lewin would do if he was fit, and then you can have Calvert-Lewin on the bench, and then you go, right, if you're injured, that's fine because we've still got Beto, and if you're available, then that's great. We'll keep you on the bench. You can play 2 up top, or you can play you in rotation with Beto. And it feels like it's finally taken Everton like 3 years to finally buy that striker to compete with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and not so that they don't have an over-reliance on him.
Yeah.
And it's about time, because now we can finally see the best of Calvert-Lewin without Everton having to rush him back as well. Because that goal he scored for the third and final one for Everton, the way he ran into that space as if he hasn't been injured in ages, and he was willing to make that run. Because when you're a player who's been injured for so long, and you've had so many different types of injuries as well, you start to doubt mentally in your mind if you're able to still do the things you were before. But now, with that extra pressure of having Beto to compete with, he's like, no, I've got to make that run because I want to start next week.
Yeah.
And, fair play to Everton, because they finally realised that they need another striker.
Yeah, and he seems like to be a really good fit for them, which is good to see. Tarkowski getting a good little haul as well with a goal and an assist.
Against his former side.
Yeah, I didn't realise that until I sort of looked into the game. I think someone mentioned it in the commentary of the highlights that they were saying that it was against the team that they had bad beef back in the day. He basically forced his way out of the club by the sounds of it to move to Burnley.
I watched the entire game and the commentators were milking it.
They
were milking it. Every time he got the ball, he was getting booed, and the commentators always made a point of saying something about it.
Yeah.
And then obviously when he scored, They were like, and then he did the celebration where he put his two fingers into his ears.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my God, Brentford just had a bad day at the office. But we should talk about them because it was uncharacteristic of them, wasn't it?
I was just going to say, do you think it was a case of Brentford playing badly or Everton playing well? And it was probably one of those where it was a bit of a combination of both. Brentford looked surprisingly quite open, which I think we don't really tend to see that much.
I think it was a combination of both, but they were, even despite the fact that Everton made them look bad, they were still really, really poor in this game. And I couldn't quite figure out what it was because of the fact that they were at home. I know obviously they've lost their unbeaten start and maybe they might have felt a bit aggrieved about the way it happened against Newcastle with that penalty decision. But for me, it was a penalty and, you move on from that as your professional footballers. But I don't know, maybe it was the fact that Kevin Schade was out injured in the warm-up 15 minutes before the game. Lewis Potter came in, but I thought he had an electric first 5 minutes. He got Ashley Young an early yellow. And you always think to yourself when a player gets an early yellow, run at them.
Keep
but
going.
It never quite works out like that, does it?
Yeah, I thought that with Udogie in the Spurs game. He got a yellow after about half an hour.
Yeah, I think the players around them, like I think James Garner, who was playing kind of the right midfield in front of Ashley Young, kind of realised, like, right, I need to make sure that Young does not get run at all.
Yeah.
And he was constantly there, so fair play to him. But I don't know. It's a normal side that Brentford normally play. Apart from obviously Rico Henry's been out injured. They were playing 4 at the back, which they've been trying to do more against teams they think they're going to have more of the ball against. But I don't know. I think you just have to give the credit to Everton. I think this is a performance that, Toffee fans can be really proud of because they've been showing the promise of it. And today they just fulfilled it to the maximum, making a really good Brentford side just look average.
Yeah, and hopefully, that could be a good starting point for Everton to sort of crack on home game next week, and Goodison will be rocking after that result, I'm sure.
Yeah, so Everton, for the first few games, do you think they'll be safe?
Yeah, I've thought since probably game week 2 or 3, I thought they haven't looked like a side that are going to go down. It's almost been dependent on how lucky you think they're going to get or how well they can take their chances, which could still be the case. It's only 1 week and 1 win. If they start to sort of go back into the pattern that we've seen before of them underperforming their XG and not taking their chances, then they could still be in danger. But if they play like this, not even play like this, if they just are able to take their chances as well as they have this week, and because they've been really good defensively as well, they haven't conceded many chances, they haven't conceded many goals either. If they can just keep that up and press on, they can work their way up the table easily.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because against, I think, opening game of the season against Fulham at home, where they should have won that game.
They played so well in that game.
Yeah, and I think they got criticism against the Arsenal because of the fact that they just didn't create any chances. Then their entire game was just stop Arsenal, but Arsenal only won 1-0 and it took them 63 minutes to get that goal. So defensively has not been bad, have they?
Yeah, I think where they can pick up the points against sort of those people who are finishing around them is where they're going to get them. I don't think maybe their style of play and I don't think their style of play will particularly punish the sort of top 8 teams in the league, nor will I think even Dyche will go for that. I think like we saw against Arsenal, he's going to be sitting back, so I don't think they're going to be getting many points there. And I think that's a lot of the games where people will be like memeing on Everton and saying how, they're going to go down again. But I think against the teams in the bottom half of the table, they're probably one of the strongest sides.
Yeah. Maybe, which is a dramatic turnaround from the end of last season, wasn't it? But it just goes to show good recruitment, and they could really go a long way.
Yeah, right. Shut it, you two. Serious game time. After my shocking performance last week, I'm ready for redemption in the quiz.
Well, it's going to be a shame for you because it's going to be another disappointing performance.
I think I was just shagged last time. I think it was.
Oh, were you? Okay.
I think before the quiz, Mev kept mentioning Mallorca. He just kept talking about his holiday in Mallorca that didn't exist. And it just...
Well, this is
he
funny
got it in my head. It was Darren Brown mind games, and he had it drilled in my head, knowing I knew it was
hang
Malaga.
on. We were talking about our holidays, but I didn't even go to Mallorca. I went to Rome on holiday.
You slipped in Mallorca. I mean, you must have done. There's no way I could have done that. I refuse to accept that I bottled it.
The thing is, with this game, it's so easy to get in your own head. And when you think of a team, and because it's like you can't just have empty silence on the podcast, you've got to push you. So you've got to say like, okay, fine, maybe I'll go. And then you just start to panic.
Yeah.
And you bottled it last week.
I did bottle it.
So I have been nice to you this week. I think you could get it in 2. You should get it in 3, and you will get it in 4, if not.
You said that last week. I will get it. Yeah, I could get it in 4 points or something last week. And
But I've made it easier this week.
Okay.
So you should get it.
So it's currently 12 points to yourself.
Yes.
And 11 points to
Up to
me.
Mev.
Same rules, same game every time. 5 players, mystery club. Less players you need, more points you get.
Mm-hmm.
So should we just crack on? Who wants to go first?
I will go first because I have champion advantage.
Okay. So what do you want to give me your players first, or I give you?
No, I'm going to guess first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Right.
Get it out of the way.
Football Only Connect.
Mm-hmm.
Your first player.
Yeah.
For 5 points.
Mm-hmm.
Ricky Lambert.
Ricky Lambert. Played for Southampton. Joined Liverpool. Not sure where he went after that. And it's not going to be Liverpool because it'd be too easy and I know it. So I'm going to say Southampton.
It's not Southampton, unfortunately.
Okay.
It's not Southampton.
He was a bit of a journeyman.
Player number 2 for 4 points is Nicholas Anelka.
Again, another journeyman who's been around. Anelka played for Liverpool. But Anelka played for Arsenal, but Ricky Lambert didn't. Anelka played for West Brom. Did Ricky Lambert play for West Brom? Or have we had West Brom? I feel like we've mentioned West Brom.
They're just such a big club.
Yeah, just have so many players.
Yeah.
Anelka did play in Europe, but I don't think Ricky Lambert did. I'm going to say West Brom.
He's got it for 4
Yes!
points. Well played, mate.
Oh dear. Sorry to the listeners and viewers.
Yeah.
I've just seen, as I screamed, volume on my...
Just a massive spike.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, well played, mate. That was very good. Ricky Lambert went to West Brom after Liverpool.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought maybe, but I wasn't sure.
My next 3 players would have been Daniel Sturridge.
I would not have got him for West Brom.
I should have swapped him round.
Because Chelsea, Liverpool, and then after Liverpool, I think he went to America.
Yeah, and he was at City as well.
Oh, yeah, he's at City. And Bolton.
Yeah.
But I completely forgot about West Brom.
I should have gone Sturridge first then. But no, it was a good answer. 4 points. Nicholas Anelka, West Brom was pretty niche one. And then it was Lukaku for 2 points, and then Gnabry for 1.
Yeah, well, Lukaku couldn't have been any of his European sides because again Lambert, so it had to be Premier League. It had to be Premier League.
Yeah, it could have been an obscure Lambert used to play for Chelsea. I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if I would have seen that. When he was like 18, he played like a game for them or something. Because Chelsea, Chelsea they had so many random players as well.
Yeah, but that's true. But I always know Ricky Lambert as like a proper journeyman. He Liverpool was his dream destination, and he didn't play for many big teams at the top level, apart from Southampton and Liverpool.
Yeah, but he was at the Liverpool Youth Academy. I actually saw his Wikipedia page. Yeah, it was did it say 92 to 97? He started at Liverpool, and then he obviously got released or something, and then had to work his way all the way back up. I think that's probably why. Because is he Scouse?
I have no idea.
I got a feeling I suppose if he was playing for the academy. So I think that's why when Liverpool went in for Southampton, he left them despite being a legend there, because it was probably his dream to be back at Liverpool, that sort of redemption story.
And I felt so bad for him because he was trying to replace Luis Suarez.
Yeah.
Him alongside Balotelli, Fabio Borini, and an injured Daniel Sturridge. It was an awful season.
Yeah.
It was the season we got smashed by Real Madrid 3-0 at home.
Damn.
Yeah, and we ended up in Europa League. Did we? Or did we just knocked out of the competition or Champions League? I don't know. It was an awful season. I'll put it out of my mind.
So that's, you're up to 16 points now, Mev.
I know, that's great.
That's 10. That was a very good answer.
I do worry for you now.
Oh, God.
Okay, but that's fine. Don't worry about it. You'll do fine. Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, your first player for 5 points is Fabrizio Colocini.
Okay.
I got confused because Fabrizio Romano was so ingrained in my head. I'm like...
So I think probably the only team I know Colocini is Newcastle, and that's going to be way too obvious. And I'm pretty sure we've had Newcastle before, actually. Do I know any other teams? He may have played in the Spanish league at some point. It could be an Argentinian side, I suppose. Boca Juniors or River Plate. I don't think I know any other Prem sides he would have played for, so let's just go for a punt and go for Boca Juniors.
It's incorrect. So, your next player for 4 points is Mario Mandzukic.
Okay, Mandzukic. He was at Bayern Munich. He was at Juve. I wouldn't think Colocini would have been at Juve. Where was Mandzukic before Bayern Munich? I don't think I'm going to know that either. And after Juve? Bayern or Juve, I think I'm going to have to go for. What was more likely where Colaccini played? I don't think either of those are very likely, are they? Where else has Mandzukic played? Did he play for another German club? Like a Wolfsburg or something like that, maybe? Mandzukic. Let's go Juve.
No, it's incorrect. So your third player for 3 points is Toby Alderweireld.
Okay. It's obviously Spurs. It's not going to be Spurs. He was at Benfica. No, that was Jan Vertonghen. Where else has Alderweireld been? Ajax, obviously. Could be Ajax. Southampton. Atletico Madrid.
It's got it.
Yes. Should have got that Mandzukic. That was odd. Yeah, that was quite obviously he actually used to play for Atletico.
Yeah, Mandzukic played for Atletico Madrid from 2014 to 2015 season. Played 28 times, scored 12 goals, but got sold in the summer after having a fallout with Diego Simeone.
Oh, classic.
And Colaccini was there on loan from AC Milan.
Damn.
In 02-03.
You shouldn't have said that because you could have used that for
Honestly,
later on.
I might have to get it up because just talk for a bit because Colaccini played for a load of top sides before ending up in Newcastle.
Yeah, because Alderweireld and Vertonghen have both had like pretty, I suppose, interesting careers. They've kind of like been at like a few big clubs and a few smaller clubs, and then obviously Alderweireld. Which one is it, Alderweireld or Vertonghen? One of them's now playing in the Belgian league.
I think Alderweireld is.
I think Vertonghen might have gone there actually.
They both might have gone.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I think Alderweireld, did he win the league? Was it
did.
when he won on the last day?
Yeah, that was Alderweireld. Yeah. He scored an absolute banger, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, Colaccini from Boca Juniors, he went to AC Milan.
Oh, so he was at Boca Juniors. I'll take that.
He was at Boca. Yeah, to be fair, yeah. Went on loan to San Lorenzo, Alaves, Atletico Madrid, Villarreal, and then moved permanently to Deportivo La Coruña.
Nice.
Before joining Newcastle. They're going back to San Lorenzo, which he spent a season on loan, and then Aldosivi? I don't know.
Is that Al as in AL? Is that like a Saudi or Qatari side?
No, as in maybe Spanish or...
Oh, right. I thought it was like AL.
I don't know where.
Oh, Aldosivi. Oh, okay. Not Al. No. Dosivi. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I don't think he's still playing, so... No. But there we go. What's the score?
Damn,
you got 3 and I got 4.
So that puts it 16-13.
16-13.
So you made your gap bigger.
Yeah. Well, you've just been too nice to me.
Well, next week I'll do Aldosivi. Make sure Colaccini is not in there.
Fair enough.
All right, back to the episode. Speaking of the bottom half of the league, though, up next, Chelsea 0, Aston Villa 1.
Oh my god. Yeah. Oh my god. Where to begin?
Yeah, I feel like it might.
How harsh do you want to go in on Chelsea?
I was going to say it might be quite harsh to say how Everton have played well and underperformed, because I do feel like an aspect of Chelsea's season so far is that I think they have the 3rd best defence in the league and they're 15th. They've only conceded 6 goals, which is the same as Arsenal. Liverpool and City are the only teams who have conceded less. And then the problem is their goal scoring. They cannot put the ball in the net. And they are making chances. They've got a better XG than Arsenal and Spurs. They have one of the best XG differences per 90 in the league.
Probably the best.
If it's done on that, it's better than Brighton, it's better than Arsenal, it's better than Spurs. They probably would be, I think, almost like 4th, 5th in the league on their XG per 90. But they cannot score. They have scored the same amount of goals as Bournemouth, Fulham and Everton, having the same problem. Cannot put the ball in the net. Nicholas Jackson, 3rd best XG in the league at 3.79, and he's underperformed and only scored 1 goal. And now he's suspended next week.
And if you talk about the goals they did score, 3 of them came at home against Luton.
Yeah. They just... I don't know what it is. I don't know what the problem is, because they don't seem to be playing bad. Against Villa, they weren't bad. Villa, I think, had a really good defensive performance, and they actually did restrict Chelsea to quite a low shot volume in this game. Even if their XG was 1.3, I think they only had maybe 7 or 8 shots in the game. And I just don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the way that they are set up. I don't know if it's because of injuries, but their squad isn't even that great, but they still seem to be performing. I don't know what it is. I feel like there's so many different potential answers.
Is that I'm going to leave? There's so many different answers, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. What?
Okay. So, I think first of all, you got to talk about the players, and I'm sick to death of talking about how bad Chelsea have been because it's been this case for since the beginning of last season now. But you need to give the players time to get to know the club, get to know each other, and get to know how the manager wants to play his football. Because of the fact that they've had so much of an overhaul, so many players have left, so many players have come in, that they probably don't even know each other that well. Which is why you often don't see the amount. I don't even know how many players Chelsea have bought and sold in the last 12 to 18 months. But that's why you don't see this massive overhaul all at once. Because you still need players who are going to implement the values of the club, the way the manager wants to play, and instill those into the new players, and so that tradition isn't lost. And then you need to combine that with the tactics on the pitch. And it's just not clicking at this moment in time. But if you're a player, say like Thiago Silva, you've had Thomas Tuchel, you've had Bruno, the Brighton assistant,
Yeah.
the
Can't remember his name.
yeah, whatever. You've had Graham Potter, and now you've had Richard Pochettino in 14 months.
Am I lying, or was Frank Lampard there at the end of last season?
He was there.
Yeah,
So hang
I feel
on,
like
that's
I
five.
feel like I forgot about
Oh
that.
my
I can't
God.
imagine I was imagining.
Yeah,
that.
no, Frank Lampard came in.
Yeah.
So that's 5 managers in 14 months. And I just think, the best thing for Chelsea, just get a win and then no one talks about you.
Yeah.
I think that's the best thing. Because like Man United, they're quite low on the list this week of things to talk about because they won a game for once. And you're a story when you lose and when you drop points. But when you win, everything's fine. And people don't get the torches out. They just put them in the basement for next week, But there's need to win games of football. And it's okay saying they need time. But how long do you give them? Because these are good players individually on paper. And on paper, they should be doing better against some of the teams that they're coming up against. But I just don't know. Because it feels like when you watch Chelsea that they're so close, yet they're so far. And I don't know what the truth is anymore.
I think the key point, like you said, is that there's too much change, too much madness. There's too much going on. It's just all too much. And I think, like we're saying, they're not scoring enough. And it's probably like, I don't know, when a player misses a chance and you look round and your mates, your teammates, your colleagues are there cheering you on, they probably don't even really have that. I don't think there's probably much team spirit because they don't know each other because they're all so new. And I think if we look at their team, some of their best performers are probably players who have been there already this season. We're looking at Raheem Sterling. He's been there. Yeah. He's had 2 seasons there now. We're looking at Thiago Silva, who's got one of the highest touches and passes per 90 in the league and has been, again, amazing for them and the reason why their defence has been so good. And then the rest of the team is just like, if you would have said that would have been their team this season ago, you'd been like, what are you talking about? Robert Sanchez has come in. Gusto's
He had a good game, to be fair.
He did, but it's too much change, and Gusto's coming in. I know Colwell was obviously at Chelsea before, but now he's just come straight into the team. Caicedo, Mudryk, Jackson, all just sort of coming in. And it's just a big mess, really.
I mean, the only thing is Pochettino seems to have settled on what he believes is his best 11.
I think so.
With Sanchez, probably Reece James, but he's out injured, so it's Gusto. Axel Disasi, Thiago Silva, Levi Cole, a left back. With who would you play? Probably Enzo in the 10 kind of role. Conor Gallagher and who was it? Caicedo.
Mudryk, Sterling, Jackson.
And maybe Conor Gallagher isn't in it if some of the injured, like if Carney Chukwuemeka's maybe in the side, if he's fit. But for some reason, that's the team he seems to believe is his best 11. So he's just got to go with it, and he's got to die on that hill, because I think changing it again would be infuriating. I mean, he's probably got to, because Malagusta is now got suspended because he got sent off. Nicholas Jackson has now received 5 yellow cards already, which in 6 games, how on earth are you doing that? I think
4 of them are for dissent.
4 of them are for dissent. And I'm just like, it's so silly, because I know he's 22 and he's young, but it's just petulant, isn't it? So obviously, I don't know who's going to play from. Maybe Armin Broja, who's I think only just come back from injury. Maybe they change the personnel and maybe Sterling plays up front, but then who you bring on the right, and that's another change between the wing back and the full back. And I don't know. I don't know.
I think in the short term, it's not going to be getting any better. It's going to get worse in the next couple of weeks with these sort of. Looking at their bench at the weekend is just. I don't even know half the names on it. That's how bad their sort of injury situation is, despite how much they've spent on the squad. They've gone from having a squad of too much to probably too little now in the way it is. Badiashile Sheila and Fofana still out injured. Will they come into the squad and replace Thiago Silva one day? Is Colwell going to start to become a left back, which I don't like? I really liked Colwell in a centre back partnership last season, and I think that is where he's best. I understand it's because Gusto's coming out as a really, really high wide wing back, and Colwell sort of comes in to make it a back three. But I don't know.
But don't you think like with Colwell at left back, they've really got the 2 for centre backs in Silva and Disasi. But why didn't you just choose to play 2 out of those 3? Because at the moment you've got Chilwell, Cucurella and Maatsen, 3 left backs. You're not even in starting 11.
No.
And you're playing a centre back at left back. And if that maybe fits your system in the way you want to play, fair enough. But the squad is so still after all this transfer business, all the money spent, is still so unbalanced. I don't know.
Even for playing like Enzo as a 10, to me, I think he's so good and he probably is one of Chelsea's best players. He's not a 10.
But that's because of injuries again, isn't
it? But then what's the other one is Chukwuemeka, who's a good player again, but he's not the quality at the moment that Chelsea should be having, I think.
And then maybe Nkunku, but he's out injured as well.
Yeah. Now you've said that, actually, Nkunku, he would be the exact sort of player they probably need.
Yeah.
He is. I think if he was in that team, he would probably be maybe the only one of a player who's not in the Chelsea squad at the moment who would make a difference for them.
Yeah.
Someone who would really drive them forward and actually score goals for them, because we've seen that in the last 3 seasons in the Bundesliga. Yeah, I think maybe short term, what do they need to change?
Oh, I don't know. They don't need to change. They need consistency.
You think they need consistency? So it's going to be, maybe for once Chelsea need to be patient and have a long term.
Yeah, I don't think the club or the fan base has it in their DNA to be patient.
So do you think they just got to stick with the system at the moment, same sort of starting 11 that they have at the moment?
I think they still...
Because if the next few games, if they're still playing like this, I can't see them picking up any... Is it like with Everton, it's a case of patience, and they might actually start scoring if they get a little bit lucky and their finishing is a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us... In one game, all of a sudden, Nicolas Jackson could get a hat-trick, you know? And I think they still need to stick with the 4-2-3-1, because Jackson can be isolated on his own. He needs support of a number 10 behind him. Who the number 10 is, I don't know, because, like I said, ideally Nkunku, if not Chukwuemeka, but they're both out injured. So I don't know. I think they need more balance in that side, and I know Gusto plays really high up on the right-hand side, but I think they need to bring in either Chilwell, Cucurella, or Maatsen at left back, and you need to make a decision out of Colwell, Silva, and Disasi, and just choose to drop one of them on the bench. Yeah. Because I think at this rate, there's nothing going down the left-hand side, which means Mudryk then becomes more isolated, and therefore he doesn't get chances as well. Poch needs to stick with what he thinks is the best 11. I don't agree with Poch that what he's picking is his best 11, though.
Yeah, I think I agree, to be honest. I agree. So we'll see next week, because it's going to be different. Yeah. It's going to be a very different 11.
Sorry, we should probably mention Aston Villa.
I was just about to say...
we talked ages about Chelsea.
They had a really good defensive performance, I think was probably the best part of the game. They, like I said, they really restricted Chelsea to not many shots. They had a really sort of compact and well-organised back line that did not allow for many gaps. I think Digne has really had a comeback this season. I think he had another really good game. He's getting really high. He's getting lots of crosses in. He's getting lots of shots in, which is a really good outlet for Villa. And it was nice to see Watkins get a Premier League goal, because he's someone who's been really good for them and has had a few chances that maybe he should have taken. So it was good to see him get a goal and get a really important goal that got them a 1-0 win away.
Yeah, and I think especially after they lost 3-2 against Liga Warsaw in the Conference League, I think that would been really disappointing for Villa back in European football for the first time in a while. That the first game was a defeat, but I think that squad would have learned a lot from that defeat, and they would have gone and they would have had something to prove going into the Chelsea game, which I think Chelsea don't have at the moment, because I think they're just coasting along. But all I can say is Villa is like fair play, because I also look at the Villa bench. and the strength and depth of that bench. I think the midfield especially. I think Douglas Luiz, Boubacar Kamara, and who was playing in the 10?
McGinn.
No, McGinn tends to play out wide, doesn't he?
Diaby.
Diaby plays in the 10, but yeah, McGinn's kind of out wide. But the thing, like, you still got Ramsey to come back, and I think when he comes back, he's going to have a lot of fun on that team. Yuri Tielemans cannot get into that side at this moment in time. And for me, he was someone who, Liverpool were linked to them. I would have taken him. And the fact that it's taken him ages, I mean, if you think about the fact that Emi Buendia is out for the season with an injury, where would he fit into all of this?
Yeah.
And so I think Aston Villa is a perfect example, if you're comparing it to Chelsea, that is, of how you need to develop your team slowly, bring in the right players and the right characters, stick to a manager and a game plan, and eventually it will work out.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think Aston Villa could have brought in, say for example, like Diaby. They could have brought him in 2 seasons ago, and he probably would have been one of their best players by far. But they didn't splash an absolute load of cash. They built that team, and now they've brought in Diaby where they're at a point where he can fit straight in, and the players around him are quality enough to support a player like that as well. They've looked really good this season. Emery's built a really good system there, and I think it will be another good season for Villa, hopefully. In the Conference League, you'd imagine, like you've said, they've learnt a lot from that game. Tough away fixture, like Warsaw is. Pretty hostile atmosphere, I can imagine. And that's just something that they'll just pick up and learn. And I think probably for Aston Villa, there was more fear going to Warsaw despite being a weaker opponent than there is going to Chelsea at the moment. I think nobody sees that particularly as a difficult fixture on the calendar. And that's a big thing for the big teams. I think when you have that fear of other teams, they are going to sit back and let you have the ball, even though they might be playing a deep low block, which is difficult to play against sometimes. Just having that ball as a top team is such a big thing, and I think if Chelsea continue to start to lose that, it's pretty worrying signs.
Yeah, I completely agree. But we should talk about Chelsea's relegation rivals, Bournemouth, as they lost 3-1 at Brighton and Hove Albion. And another win for Brighton in the league, taking them up to 3rd, I think it is, in the league.
Yeah, it was a good way for them to come back as well, because it was an early mistake from Verbruggen that gave Slanky a goal. He couldn't have missed it, really, put it in.
Well, I would have missed it.
I don't know, you got a wicked left foot. I mean, you would have smashed it in.
I would have shanked it. I would have gone out for throw-in.
Yeah, it was, especially for Brighton to have to come back from going 1-0 down, because Bournemouth aren't a bad side. They're a good side, and they did give Brighton a decent game. Yeah, an equal amount of shots, both having 12 in the end. And the big difference for Brighton that probably got them that win was Mitoma coming on off the bench, as well as Ansu Fati. It took them 17 seconds in that second half for them to come on. Fati with the assist into Mitoma and to make it, to bring it back to 2-1.
Yeah, I mean, what a result for Brighton. Again, another team that lost on Thursday night, but they made a remarkable comeback again this weekend. I think Brighton, again, similar things to Aston Villa. Fantastic team, fantastic squad, incredibly well run, great manager. And the fact that, you got Mitoma to come off the bench in that second half and Ansu Fati. Ansu Fati actually missed. I think it was a semi-open goal. The ball came in from the right-hand side. The cross came in on his left foot. For someone who's played at Barcelona, you'd think he'd have a pretty good weak foot, wouldn't you? But he absolutely, it was a horrific finish, horrific miss.
That would have been you if that was the Solanke one.
That would have been me. Yeah. Like, I saw that from Ansu Fati, I thought I could do better, maybe. But yeah, I think Ansu Fati's going to take a little bit of time. He's been out injured for a long period of time.
Yeah, still very young.
Still very young, and he clearly he chose Brighton because, it wasn't the most biggest name, most fashionable. Other players might have gone to AC Milan, they might have gone to Borussia Dortmund, but he went to Brighton for the project. So he knows that he's going to get more game time. He knows he's going to get an education in how to play football from De Zerbi, which feels crazy saying when he's at Brighton.
Yeah.
But I think he'll come good. I think on Verbruggen, considering that goal, it has been one where he was, I think, at fault for an earlier goal in the season as well. And it is one where I did expect him to, over the course of this season with the Europa League fixtures, that he's going to be in rotation with Jason Steele. But it seems like at the moment Jason Steele just has to continue just putting consistent performances, because it feels like Verbruggen isn't really taking those chances, is he?
No, I think it'd be harsh to say he's had a bad start to the season, but I think coming into a a side that has a really clear, well-drilled system like Brighton, I can imagine it is difficult for any player to sort of go into that side, especially the goalkeeper. And especially with the way that Brighton play sometimes, building up from the back, it's quite difficult to sort of come in. Still young, and he's still good with the ball, but I think it's just going to take him time maybe to adapt as well to the press that's so common in the league at the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I do want to give a shout out to Billy Gilmore, who after he got sold by Chelsea to Brighton, he kind of lost him on my radar. I didn't really know what to expect from him or how good he was going to be. He played against Liverpool in a League Cup match, I think it was, maybe a semi-final, and he bossed our midfield. And I really was expecting high things from him. And, you know, the fact that he's now getting back to that level at Brighton, I think is really impressive, especially keeping out the likes of Mohamed Dahoud, who came in from British Dublin, who's had Champions League experience as well. I think it's fantastic. I will say for Brighton, again, with these increased fixtures, injury is going to be an issue. Because obviously now Pascal Gross is not going to be fit until after the international break. Same for James Milner, and we saw Evan Ferguson miss out a game a couple of weeks ago. And you know, injuries is going to be how does Zerbi and the Brighton side are going to be judged, because how well can they perform?
Yeah, like just touching on Gilmore, I've got him written down as someone noted as well. He's really stepped up in that game, I thought. With Pascal Gross out injured, it was Gilmore and Dahoud, which isn't the most sort of intimidating, dominating midfield partnership, but Gilmore really looked like he was controlling the show. He looked like he was being there for years, the way he was sort of directing players, the way he was really controlling the game. I think that's the first time we've seen that from Gilmore. I think it is normally Pascal Gross who tends to do that sort of almost like not a quarterback, but sort of the main man in the midfield. Yeah, and in terms of their squad, sort of squad management, it's sort of almost becoming the De Zerbi roulette, I would say, this season. We don't know who's going to be playing. We don't know what exactly their starting 11 is going to be every week. And I think that's a combination of De Zerbi sort of matching his opponents and seeing the team that he thinks will do best, and also trying to manage that squad in terms of injuries with the Europa League. And I think that is a sign of a really good, like, a really optimistic manager. I think he probably pictures them going far in Europe, so he needs to start that squad management early in the season to make sure that he does, and that they can reach that goal and that dream of getting far in a European competition, which we say every week, Brian. It's just absolutely mental that they're even here.
They're there, and they're third in the league, and they're absolutely smashing it. Like I said, Liverpool in a couple of weeks' time, which will be a massive fixture. They're at home as well. Liverpool have been awful at the Amex in recent years, so that'll be a tasty fixture. But just doesn't sound quite as good as Pep Roulette, does it? De Zerbi Roulette.
There's got to be something, Wheel of De Zerbi or something.
Oh, maybe,
There's got to be something catchy, I'm sure.
Bournemouth, Iraola, yet to have a win, but not in the relegation zone, because they've picked up a couple of draws. Have you been impressed with Bournemouth, or what do you think they should be aiming for realistically? Because let's be honest, that squad with Gary O'Neill only just survived in the Premier League. They picked up fantastic results towards like the last 8 fixtures. It was really impressive. But they've decided to bring it. The board brought in Areola. We were both very excited about him coming in. Yes, they've had difficult fixtures, but did you expect the performances and a couple more points than what they've got so far?
It's a difficult one to tell. I would probably say I maybe did expect them to get off to a better start, but I think probably looking at their team and looking at the way that they have played, that was maybe a bit optimistic for them to sort of start playing really well and start playing that progressive football that Irello wants to so soon, and for it to come off so soon. Whether it will be something that needs to develop throughout the whole season and be adapted to maybe be a bit less adventurous, a bit sort of safer, is probably something that does need to happen with the position that Bournemouth are in. And it's a difficult one. It's a similar situation with Burnley. I think a lot of people were expecting the season to really press on because they play such attacking and progressive football. But when you are in that sort of bottom third of the league, it's such a risk and it can really backfire. At the moment, it's not looking great. They still had some really good passages of games, and there's definitely been some moments in games where I've thought, okay, that if they can play like this for the full 90 minutes, they'll dominate, but they can't really risk playing that, which I understand.
Yeah, I mean, they did have a first good half against Brighton, 1-0 up at half time, and it was only when they went 1-0, Kirkes scored an own goal in the game, didn't he? which didn't help them at all. But they've got a lot of good players, so it's tough because in the league where every team's got good players, you would expect them to do all right. But I guess they probably are where they will be at the end of the season, near the relegation zone, but probably just good enough to be out of it. Which just go to show the quality of the league because they've got some fantastic players and Dom Slanky, as long as he's fit for the whole season, they'll be fine, won't they?
Hopefully, because I'd like to see them stay in the league and sort of keep working the sort of little project that they're doing.
Yeah. Moving on, Manchester City 2, Nottingham Forest 0. I don't know. I feel like we say this every week, but Man City just win again.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Moving on. It was a good
next we got Burnley.
It's a good game from them. It was a couple of probably talking points less about City because I feel like it's sort of similar when we talk about City. Just to sort of summarise it, I suppose. Nunez got his first assist in talent. He seemed to have a decent game playing in midfield. Doku was someone who stood out for me again. He looks really exciting. Someone I'm very, very jealous that City have signed. And Foden got a nice goal as well, which was sort of made by Rodri. It was a really nice pass into Walker from him. Just absolutely picked it out. Perfect. Walker lays it back. Foden finishes. And, well, I don't want to say hopefully, because I don't want to sound like a annoying Arsenal fan who wants City to lose, but I do want City to lose. So hopefully that is something that they'll miss because Rodri got himself sent off.
Yes. To be fair, I think you're everyone in the league. And I think this is similar to what we were saying about Chelsea is you're only a headline when you lose or when you drop points. So the fact that Manchester City continue to keep winning is credit to them, to be fair. And the fact that, another team who have had a lot of injuries so far this season. And now they're going to have a midfield without Kevin De Bruyne and without Rodri. How are they going to cope? I think it's a great opportunity for the likes of Calvin Phillips, who has had his game time very limited due to the fact that Rodri's been world class and I think unarguably the best defensive midfielder in the world, which has meant that he has not got a sniff in at all. But now is his chance if he wants to take it. Also, Mateus Nunes, I thought, even in the Champions League as well, he had a good game in midweek. And then to carry it on up against Nottingham Forest, I thought was really impressive. So it's going to be interesting going forward the next few weeks how the midfield is going to shape up for Man City. I'd expect Calvin Phillips to play defensive midfield in the next 3 games because when Rodri got sent off in the second half, Calvin Phillips did come on and did play that role. Mateus Nunes just goes to show, I was a bit skeptical of the signing, but they needed bodies because De Bruyne, you can't count on his injury record. Mateo Kovacic has consistently been injured throughout his career and is injured again today. You've also got the likes of Phil Foden, who sometimes plays out wide, so you can't rely on him often. So they desperately did need midfielders, and Nunes is a body, So there might be a lot of pressure on him to actually, perform, and not even just perform, but be the main man in that midfield. How do you think Man City going forward should shape up the midfield?
It's either I'm not sure because I think they would be silly not to stick obviously with Haaland, Alvarez, Doku at the moment, and probably still Foden on the right, and I think that's sort of their front four sorted. Calvin Phillips is obviously that easy replacement in with Nunez just ahead and potentially sort of still Akanji pressing up and being that midfielder alongside what would be Phillips. I think that's just an easy solution. I think because it is going to be for 3 games, I think if they try and change too much to sort of work around that, it might not work. I don't really think there's actually anyone who can sit in, because I think if it's going to be Nunez, it's got to be Nunez in there, because I don't think they really actually have any other central midfielders to go in there, unless obviously Cole Palmer potentially came in. Not Cole Palmer, sorry. Rico Lewis.
Oh, Rico Lewis,
obviously came in and played as a sort of straight midfielder, not inverting from the left back that we've seen before. Or it could be potentially even 2, like you could have Rico Lewis playing on the left and then they do that. Someone comes in. With Pep, you don't know what it's going to be, but I imagine it will be Calvin Phillips.
Are we missing something? Is Bernardo Silva injured as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah. I was like, it feels a bit light in there, but yeah, he's injured as well. Yeah, so they're really, really struggling in midfield, aren't they?
So I think it takes the choice away from Pep, which probably sometimes can be a good thing. We know he can sort of try and overcompensate for things missing. And it actually might give us a chance when we play them in 2 weeks' time. I think without Rodri, that's an area that we can potentially punish them. they haven't got their strongest team, no De Bruyne. It could be not something I'm going to go in confident for, but something where I will watch with hope.
Yeah. But the thing is, you don't have Rice or Partey or Trossard or Martinelli or Timber.
In 2 weeks, it could be that Trossard or Martinelli's back. It could be Rice could potentially be back by then. It could be a little knock. I don't think there's been any injury news just yet.
Yeah, this is where Liverpool win the league.
Yeah, you want to get a draw.
Yeah. Nottingham Forest. You didn't expect them to do anything in this game. And obviously after the red card happened, they dominated the game. They had most of the ball. The momentum chart was all with Nottingham Forest. But they couldn't convert anything. No. And I think it was probably a weird mental shift to have to go in the second half and just think, okay, we're going to have the ball. We've got to dominate. Man City are going to try and keep the ball, and they probably will keep the ball really well, even with 10 men.
Yeah.
But we're the ones who got to be on the front foot. And that was probably a weird psychological shift that they probably weren't expecting.
Yeah, I think especially being 2-0 down and then against 10 men, that's a really sort of difficult situation because they really have to press up high. But like you said, they're going to have in the back of their head that they are still going to have to be cautious as well.
Yeah.
They ended up racking up a few chances, and the XG by the end of the game is pretty similar for both teams, around that sort of 1 to 1.3 sort of mark for both.
Yeah, and I think you can tell from, the substitutes, 4 of them, they made 5 substitutes in total, but 4 of them were Callum Hudson-Odoi, Anthony Elanga, Chris Wood and Divock Origi. So the 2 wingers and 2 strikers to come on. So they were going for it, but ultimately they couldn't do much. But you won't hold it against Nottingham Forest because they've done really well so far this season.
Yeah, they have, and they're still a really good team to watch. Got some good forwards. They look solid when they solid at the back when they're defending. And yeah, it was just probably too little, too late. The red card.
Yeah. So moving on to the other side of Manchester with Burnley 0, Manchester United 1, and finally they get a win.
Yep, they needed it.
They needed it desperately,
especially away from home. It makes a big difference for confidence if you can go away and get a win. It shows you've got resilience. It shows you do have the quality and that you do have the ability maybe to get a draw in a difficult atmosphere, especially like at Burnley. And against a decent Burnley side, they played well.
To be fair, I don't think Man United played well at all. I think
it's in Burnley. I agree.
Played well. I agree. Burnley played really well, and I think Man United played awfully. Because if you look at the momentum chart, and if you just watch the game, Burnley had more possession, they had more shots. They were dominating Manchester United. And this is why I think for this particular game, you can't read too much into it. It was just a get a win at all costs after a terrible week on and off the pitch, and just get 3 points and just put stuff behind you. Because, like I said, they were really bad. Again, another team like Chelsea who have had a plethora of injuries. They've had the starting Lindelof and Johnny Evans at centre-back, Serge Reguilon at left-back, McTominay, Medjbury in midfield. That Man United team, on paper, is not good. It's not coherent. And I think that was shown by the performance.
Yeah, it was like you said, probably Burnley did dominate the game. And one of the best performances from Man United was probably Onana.
Yeah,
I would say it was good to see. He had a good game, obviously having a difficult time in the last couple of fixtures. Really, just not a good shot-stopping performance in the last few fixtures. But this week he had 4 saves, and he looked. I wouldn't say he looked confident at the start of the game, but I think as the game went on, he definitely was getting more confident, which was good to see.
Yeah.
And it was United who got the goal. It was a really nice goal. I thought it was probably one of the goals of the weekend. Johnny Evans, absolute naughty ball, which we would not have thought he would have been the one
on his weaker left foot as well.
Yeah, it was really nice. And then Bruno, a brilliant finish. Yeah, it was almost Ronaldo-esque, I'd say. That first time volley into the far corner, really nice. But yeah, not really too much else to say on Man United. But in terms of Burnley, playing well, but just they couldn't get a result, and they are right down there at the moment in the relegation zone on 1 point.
Yeah, I think for them, they don't have a striker. Well, they have strikers. Of course, they have strikers on the books, but they don't have a quality Premier League striker. I think they could have really done with, maybe signing Beto if Everton didn't, or having a Dom Solanke like Bournemouth do, or Mikel Antonio like West Ham. And I don't know. I think they did have one chance in the game which I expected them to score. The ball gets played in from Bayer into Ramsey, who takes a lovely turn and then passes it to Amdouni, who on his left foot hits the post. And when I saw Ramsey get the ball and I saw the pass go to Amdouni in real time, I thought he's got to score this. He's got to score this because Onana just doesn't even move. He doesn't. He just watches the ball go past him, and he's just praying it doesn't go in the back of the net, and it doesn't. And I think that's Burnley's issue, is that they're really struggling to score goals and lots of goals. I think they've fixed up defensively a lot more. But that being said, I don't think Man United offer too much going forward anyway in this game.
No, especially not at the moment.
No, especially not at the moment. So I think... I don't know. Oh, I really don't know with Burnley. And it is one where we're going to talk about it as well with Luton coming up next. That, all three newly promoted sides have struggled. But we haven't seen this happen too often in the league. Normally one's doing really well, one's flirting with relegation, and one's like kind of down there. I just think maybe we overhyped them at the beginning of the season.
Probably.
Maybe that, they should get rid of Ashley Barnes, and maybe just having Ashley Barnes up top would have been enough.
Yeah.
And I know he's not a prolific Premier League goal scorer, but in the league he could have maybe linked up the play between the really talented forwards that they have, and he would have created more chances for them to hopefully take some. But at the moment, they need to put the ball in the back of the net, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, they've scored less than Sheffield United this season, which isn't a good sign, especially for a side who are wanting to be an attacking, progressive side. It's not looking good.
No, absolutely not. But let's move on then. Let's talk about Luton versus Wolverhampton Wanderers, which was a 1-1 draw. And Luton getting some more points now in the league. And, well, their first point in the league. But Wolves slowly making their way up as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a deserved point for Luton. You could say they probably deserved to get 3. They finished the game with an XG of 2 compared to Wolves 0.6. Wolves obviously going down to 10 men after 40 minutes, and Luton really dominated from that point onwards.
Did you think it was a red card?
Yeah, I think it was just stupid. It was just one of those things that you just see it and players do it, and you just know they're going to get sent off. They know they're going to get sent off, and it's just that moment of madness. Yeah. And it's very, very frustrating when it happens for your own team. But yeah, despite going down to 10 minutes, actually Wolves, who went 1-0 up through Pedro Neto, which was a really nice run and finish. And then Carlton Morris getting another goal with a potentially controversial penalty.
Oh my God. I mean, the red card for me was a red card. That was a completely right decision. The penalty was an awful decision.
Do you think it wasn't?
I don't think it was at all. And I was watching the game rooting for Luton because I want them to get some points and, at least make a fight of it, despite all the odds and, the story. But as soon as the ref gave that penalty and VAR didn't overturn it, I was just rooting for Wolves just because the referee. I just felt like it ruined my perception of the game.
What I saw, I actually thought it was definitely a penalty. To be honest, I thought
based on the rules or based on how you feel the game should be.
Well, the rules are still subjective. I think in terms of whether it takes deflection, it depends. I think if it takes deflection and the hands are still more in a natural position. Obviously, with the rules of it being out of the natural silhouette or wherever, I think if it takes a deflection off someone's knee and it hits your hand and your hand is right next to the knee, that's never going to be a penalty and it never should be. But I just feel like the situation of that moment in the game, they were trying to cross the ball into the box and his hand is up almost here, like up above his shoulder and above his head. And that ball very easily could have just gone straight onto his hand and there would have been no question whether it was a penalty. Yeah. I think the way it deflected up onto his hand, for me, didn't really make too much of a difference of the penalty. Because he could have quite easily meant to cross it along the floor and it went up in the air. Whether that deflected, he still wouldn't have had time to move his hand away from the ball, and his hand shouldn't have been in that position to potentially block a cross. For all he knows, that he could have scooped it up and his hand would still be in there and it definitely would have been a penalty.
I think as a defender, when you're either watching the ball or you're watching your man, your head's on this constant pivot, and those are the only two things that are going through your mind. And without even realizing that, maybe it's just a natural thing, the way you run, your arms automatically come up. Or maybe he's pointing to someone to say, mark your man or watch that space or whatever, giving instruction to another teammate. And I just think sometimes you just do stupid stuff, and then you think to yourself, "Oh, why did I do that?"
Yeah.
You know, but then you don't think of it in the moment. And in the Premier League, when the football is so fast and quick, I don't even know why his hand was that high up. First of all,
I think it was just that's for me why his hand was in that position. Just sticks out straight away.
but for me, it was still the fact that it was a deflection, because no matter, he could have tried to move that hand away, but if the ball's coming in that fast, he doesn't have a chance. So even if the ball is, I don't know, 20 meters away from the ball and the player, if the ball reaches that player too quickly for that player to move their hand away, so say it was traveling like, I don't know, 100 miles an hour or whatever, then that shouldn't be handball.
I understand where you're coming from, but just the way I just saw it straight away, I just thought if that ball was crossed in without the deflection, and for me the deflection didn't make much difference based on the action the player was doing, it would have been definitely a penalty.
But say, no, hang on, no, because as a defender, I hate it. Because say he was saying the ball came into the box and you're the teammate who's kicking the ball away and you're just putting your hand to say clear it because you don't want him to you don't want him to try and pass the ball out. So he puts his hand to saying clear it and then he miskicks it onto you and then deflects up in your arm, which you're trying to tell him to clear it as an example. Is that a penalty? It's not in the natural position, but
I think it depends. I think it depends how much the arm's pulling away, and I feel like in that situation, generally, or if it's so clear the player's not. If you're telling someone to clear it, and then there's a chance a cross is coming in anyway, that's just absolutely stupid. Anyway, I think if you've got your hand in your air trying to defend someone, talking to someone else, you need to focus on the ball, not on trying to get your players to clear it out.
Oh, I don't know.
But I get it in terms I don't like a lot of the handball rules, and I hate to see when defenders have their hands behind their backs trying to block it. I remember there was a point about 10 years ago when players all started doing that when the new sort of handball rules came in at that time, and everyone was saying it's impossible for the defender. How can a defender have good balance when he's got his arms behind his back trying to block across?
Yeah.
And I completely understand that, and I think there should never be a rule that encourages players to put their hands behind their back.
Yeah, because it's a momentum thing as well. Because say you're going for a sliding tackle, using your hands with your momentum helps you go further and hopefully get to that ball. Whereas if you've got your hands behind your back, I mean, it could be the difference between you making the tackle or not, or getting sent off potentially.
Yeah.
So I've seen players like going for a sliding tackle with a hand behind the back, and the attacking player just done a fake cross and then cut it back. And then it takes the player longer because they've got the balls behind the hands behind the back and takes a longer position to use the hands to get back up. And I don't know. I just feel like there's no common sense left.
No, it's so difficult because they have to make the rules like as objective as they can, and for me, it just feels like if an arm is out, it's always going to be a pen. Whether I think that should be the case in the rules, but I feel like if the arms start to get past like here, and they're like there, and it hits it, and it's in the box, and it's potentially stopping a cross or a shot, it is always going to be a pen.
Do you remember in the Champions League final, Liverpool vs Spurs, where it was Sissoko, I think it was?
Yeah, that was sort of like there, wasn't it?
I didn't think that was a penalty. But then, I mean, like, what? He's just literally just pointing with his hand, just going to his teammate behind him, just like, watch like the space there. Yeah. But the arm is still by his side, and then Mo Salah just hits him from a yard away, and just like, penalty. And I know the game's moved on, like, there's been like 5 years since that situation, but just to give, I don't know.
It's difficult, and it's difficult because with a lot of the rules, the attackers are the ones getting the benefit of the doubt. They don't want, they will never bring in rules that reduce scoring in football. So it's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah.
But I think I was probably surprised that maybe there wasn't. I wasn't surprised. Probably wasn't ruled out the way it has been. But when I just first saw it, I thought, oh, surely that's got to be a pen.
Well, it's just consistency, isn't it? Because
that's maybe where it's lacking.
Two high-profile instances have been Romero this season against Arsenal. It's a penalty, but against Man United, it's not.
Yeah.
So it's like, and then you see, I can't remember his name, but is it Dermot Gallagher on Ref Watch on Sky Sports on the Monday night?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, but I see him trying to justify the decisions, and then he goes, "So what's the difference?" And he just says, "That's just what I believe," and it's not anything in the rules. It's just my opinion is this. and then you go, well, my opinion is you're wrong. So I mean, like, where does it end?
That's the difficulty with VAR as well, isn't it? For things like offsides and fouls and things like that, is that there's still subjectivity in them. I think the VAR has finally started to work for offsides well, and I don't.
Oh yeah, I agree.
To be fair, I don't know why I'm saying finally. I think it's always worked fine for offsides. I don't know why anyone was ever complaining about VAR offsides anyway.
Yeah, because
you're
either or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, however they draw the lines, that's just how you're looking at it on your bloody TV. They're not. It's you're on or you're off. They can do it by the pixel. They can do it by the frame of the. They can do it like in a 30th of a second when the ball is played. Never had a problem with VAR for offside, but there is still difficulty in terms of VAR for decisions like fouls and handballs and things, because there's got to be context in the game of what's happening, where the position of players, what the ref themselves thinks. Every ref is going to be very slightly different, even though they're obviously trained and following the same rule book.
Yeah, well, we didn't even talk about it, but like Rasmus Højlund was offside. No, Johnny Evans had a goal disallowed because Rasmus Højlund was offside.
Yeah.
But against Manchester City versus, I can't remember, Fulham.
Yeah, with
Kanji, he was in the offside position. And then they were later admitted it was a mistake. But it felt like every football fan watching was like, he's offside.
Yeah.
So, and then they go, okay, now sorry, we're wrong. And I get it. But it just infuriates them, fans, and doesn't help them. We probably talked too much about it. But we're compensating for the fact that there's nothing to talk about in Crystal Palace 0, Fulham 0, apart from Sam Johnson just being bloody brilliant.
Yeah, really good performance from him. I think he had 5 or 6 saves by the end. Both teams didn't really make many, I suppose, classic high-quality chances. He brought us some great saves from people being able to get some really nice shots off, but
not even players.
The chance creation wasn't particularly amazing from both. It was a pretty stale game. Any other things I can think of to talk about this game? I've taken Edouard out my fantasy team to bring in Carlton Morris for the double game week. That's related to Crystal Palace in a way, I suppose.
In a way. As Roy Hodgson's back, it's nice to see him on the touchline because he did have the scare last week. It's good to see him back, still kicking at his age, just about, I think. But yeah, I think, to be fair, a draw is a good result for both teams because they're both reasonably going to be mid-table. I think we had doubts about Fulham about how many goals they can score this season without Mitrovic. Showed in this game because they didn't convert any of their chances, and like I said, Johnson had an absolutely wonderful game. But yeah, both teams will be fine, won't they?
Yeah, probably.
Cool. That's it. Thank you very much for listening to the Football Fellowship podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, please give us 5 stars, and if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Anything else to say, Tobes?
Thanks again for a lovely podcast, Mev.
It's
been great. I'll give you 5 stars.
Oh, thank you, Tobes. Well, I'll give you 10.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We hope to see you next week, and hope you have a good week.
Cheers.